Hello, my name's Tracy Mason, otherwise known as the Menopause Mentor. Thank you for joining me for the webinar, which is going to last about 20 minutes. The webinar is going to be in two parts. At the end of part one, you'll be very clear on what are the causes and the symptoms of the menopause. And then in part two, we're going to look at how to alleviate those symptoms naturally. And during part two, I'm going to give you some easy tips on how to alleviate your symptoms. So please rejoin me for part two. But before we start, it's really important to understand that our health is like a jigsaw. And the lifestyle choices that we make, the nutrition that we put into our mouths, the exercises we choose to do, and anything we choose in addition as far as nutrition is concerned, i.e. our nutritional boosters, all of these should fit closely as if in a jigsaw. If anything is out of alignment, we start to get symptoms coming to the surface, and menopause is a symptom of the fact that homeostatically, internally, we're out of balance. So bringing us back into balance is very, very important and crucial for optimum health as far as females who are menopausal are concerned. So we're going to cover what is the menopause symptoms and their causes, a little bit about hormone replacement therapy. We're going to look at the importance of liver health, and part two is about the natural solutions to the menopause. So the menopause itself is technically only one day. It's the last day of your last period, but obviously we don't know when that's going to be. And perimenopause can last anything from 5 to 15 years, and it can start these days at the age of 35. However, as the graph shows, it's usually from our mid-40s to our early 50s. And the perimenopause is seen as the run-up to the last day of our last period, as I said earlier. Postmenopause is any time after, when ovulation has ceased and fertility no longer exists. Just looking at the female menstrual cycle, what happens is that estrogen rises over the first 14 days. The body sends messages to the pituitary gland to send messages for luteinizing hormones and folate stimulating hormones to be released. That stimulates the ovaries to release the egg. The egg is in a sac called the corpus luteum, which contains progesterone. This is where progesterone is produced. It's produced in the ovaries. If the egg is fertilized, then the progesterone level will stay high and the egg will become embedded into the wall of the womb. If no fertilization takes place, the progesterone level will drop off, and then the start of the menstrual cycle happens again. Now, what happens during the perimenopausal years is that we see less and less of the corpus luteum being produced, i.e. less and less eggs being produced by the ovaries, which means we have less and less progesterone being produced, and it's the imbalance between progesterone dropping off quite dramatically and the amount of estrogen that we have in the system, which is leading to issues as far as menopause is concerned. Let's have a quick look at our hormones which will affect the menopause. Estrogen is produced by the adrenals, the ovaries, by the breast tissue, and to some extent by the liver, and it's the primary female sex hormone. Progesterone is produced in the ovaries, and as I said previously, but it also has some origins in the liver. It's the key to a woman's menstrual cycle. Testosterone is the male-dominated hormone, but we still have it, and it's very, very good for bone strength and for fat burning. All three are steroid hormones, and all three need essential fatty acids. Estrogen is a fat-storing hormone, and progesterone and testosterone are fat-burning. On the graph, you can see that between the ages of 35 to 50, progesterone, the blue line, drops off by 75%. And the estrogen drops off, but only by 35%. It's this disparity shown in red, the disparity between progesterone and estrogen, that is causing menopausal symptoms. A drop in estrogen will cause irritability, weight gain, as it's fat storing. The yin and yang of estrogen to progesterone means that progesterone keeps estrogen under control. But as progesterone drops off dramatically in that 35 to 50 years of age, it means that estrogen is sort of left to run riot. And this is where we see symptoms starting, like hot flushes, weight gain, etc. Estrogen is the more excitable hormone, where progesterone is more calming, which is why in the lead up to the menstrual cycle, in the last 3 or 4 days, when the progesterone drops off, we get sugar cravings, irritability, anxiousness, because estrogen has become more dominant again. And we're going to feel the lack of progesterone even more acutely in the perimenopausal years because it's dropping off very, very rapidly compared to estrogen. Let's look at some of the general symptoms of menopause. Many of these symptoms can be quite frightening, which is why most women, or many women, will go to the doctor for a solution. And actually, there are many natural solutions out there once we understand what is going on. Now, some of these symptoms are identical to those of adrenal fatigue. So it may not be the onset of early menopause, i.e. it could be too much stress in the system that's wiping out the adrenals. And if we were to go to the GP who would recommend HRT, this wouldn't be the solution. Let's have a look at HRT. Many women feel that HRT is their only solution as their symptoms are so intolerable that they go to the doctor who will offer HRT. Too many doctors see women as a collection of hormones and thus regard menopause as a deficiency disease that needs to be corrected by replenishing declining levels of estrogen. But doctors are not recognising that menopause is a stage which every woman will go through naturally, and we need to manage it naturally. All HRT does is delay the inevitable, because if we go on to HRT for 5 years, we still have to come off it. Look at the graph again. It's the difference between estrogen and progesterone which causes menopausal symptoms. We don't need more estrogen, which is what a lot of HRT are. The fact that hormones are out of balance for other reasons, possibly lifestyle choices, possibly nutritional deficiencies, if doctors are seeing it as a problem which they need to solve with drugs, and with HRT, the majority of which estrogen-based, it's like taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Because when we understand how these symptoms occur in the first place, we can really manage them from a natural point of view. Should every woman be prescribed estrogen? A declining level of estrogen is not the problem. A declining level of progesterone is the problem. And the fact that we have a heightened level of estrogen in the system means that by adding more estrogen, it's just making it worse. And estrogen, as we know, is the tissue-building hormone. This is why we are seeing more issues like breast cancer and ovarian cancer becoming a real problem. Primarium was the first HRT. It's made from pregnant mare's urine. Thereafter came the arrival of bioidentical hormones. Now, bioidentical hormones are closer in molecular structure to our own, supposedly, and in a more natural form, but we still need to come off them. There was a study called the Million Women Study in the 1990s conducted by Cancer Research. This study gave us overwhelming evidence that there is a link between some cancers and HRT. And now research has shown that there are numerous cases of ovarian cancer directly linked to the use of HRT. As we've said, estrogen is tissue building. It encourages the growth of tissue. This is why more breast cancers are associated with HRT, as our body is replicating tissues because our body is reading a higher level of estrogen. So understanding what is happening as far as our menopausal symptoms is crucial as far as we're concerned. So there are 3 layers. This is why our symptoms are so bad. Xenoestrogens, lifestyle choices, and stress. We're going to look at them all individually. Xenoestrogens. This is the first level or layer. It's the amount of xenoestrogens that we're now exposed to, and they're in so many products that we just take for granted these days. They're chemicals which mimic estrogen in the body, and what they do, they lock into estrogen receptor cells and tell the body that the estrogen levels are still high. And even the minutest amount of xenoestrogen can act as an endocrine disruptor. This acts to knock out all the other hormones of the endocrine system. So, what is the endocrine system? It's a collection of glands that produce hormones that will regulate our metabolism, our growth and development, our tissue function, our sexual function, sleep and moods, amongst other things. So, as I mentioned in the previous slide, parabens come in lots of forms and not just cosmetics. BPAs are chemicals that coat plastics, predominantly water bottles. These chemicals stop the water in the bottle from going green. Now, water can be in that bottle for up to 9 months before we drink it. And when the bottle gets warm, the BPA will leak into it. But it's not just water bottles, it's takeaway coffee cups and microwave cooking if we're using plastics. And pesticides. Pesticides are sprayed onto our food, and we ingest on average 500 grams each year. Our body has to detox all of these, and they have a xenoestrogenic effect on our system. And these days, non-organic livestock are now loaded with hormones. The tap water that we drink will contain birth control and HRT hormones, all of which passes through our bodies into the watercourses and back through into the drinking water. The food we eat is loaded with hormones and steroids. It now only takes 6 weeks to grow a chicken to market ready size, a third of the time it used to in the 1940s. And because we're at the top of the food chain, we take on board these hormones, and this leads to estrogen dominance. The symptoms of estrogen dominance are headaches, digestive issues, brain fog, hot flushes, fibroids, all related to a higher level of estrogen, and some are similar to perimenopausal symptoms too. So understanding how to get rid of these xenoestrogens out of our system is crucial to managing menopausal symptoms in our mid to late 40s. On the graph, you'll see the imbalance. The straight line at the top is a xenoestrogen line, where our body is sending messages that estrogen levels are high. You can see that the xenoestrogen line is exacerbating these menopausal symptoms. A higher reading means that the disparity between the progesterone reading and the estrogen reading is even greater. The gap between the green line and the blue curly line means that those menopausal symptoms are getting worse and worse. The xenoestrogen line just doesn't drop off, but the progesterone level does. And as we know, the bigger the disparity, the harder it is to deal with the symptoms. So that's the first level, xenoestrogen. Now we add in the second level. The second level is the poor quality of our food and the poor lifestyle choices that we make, and then add in lack of exercise or the wrong type of exercise. All of these will put a pressure on our endocrine system. And now the endocrine system, particularly the adrenals and the liver, should be taking over the production of estrogen and progesterone from the ovaries. But as we have a pressure on our adrenals from the stress we're now under, from poor food quality and the poor diets that we have, all of these issues mean that cortisol is being released, and the adrenals can't then produce what they should be producing as far as estrogen and progesterone are concerned. The liver is then compromised, and it has less and less of a role to play in terms of producing the right balance of progesterone and estrogen. So keeping lifestyle choices spot on is absolutely crucial. And then add in the lack of exercise or the wrong type of exercise. This can lead to a further stress on the system, which means, again, we have an increased level in cortisol. Cortisol is the dominant hormone. It will knock out all the other hormones. And that will mean that we will not be producing anything like the levels of progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone from the adrenals and liver that we should be producing. So getting the balance right is absolutely crucial. For good hormone balance, we need to nourish our adrenal system with the right vitamins and minerals and the right fats. And this is the third layer. Even if we feel we're eating healthily, look at the image of the spinach. The reason we're not getting the required nutrition is because the food we eat lacks the nutrition it had in years ago. The spinach, one bowl in 1953. In 1997, let alone now, we would need to eat 50 bowls to get the same nutritional value. Well, why is this? It's because the soil today is lacking the minerals that it used to have. If we're not getting nutrition to nourish our endocrine system, this will cause internal stress within the body. And that stress within the body is going to result in a cortisol release. And, as we know, cortisol is the dominant hormone, which will knock off other hormones. So inadequate nutrition plus a toxic environment will lead to more stress on the body. So we've got internal stresses and we've got external stresses on our body. So also external stresses will also lead to a cortisol release. As a female moved into menopause many years ago, her reaction will be to retreat and become almost hermit-like for a few years to allow her body to repair and heal and to stay as calm as possible. But that doesn't happen now. Because of the way life is, because we're having children later, and so they're younger when we're going through the menopause. There's stress on relationships because many women have to work. We sit in traffic and get stressed because we can't do anything about it. Our mobile phones are always on. Plus incorrect exercise. Some women think that when they've put on weight around the middle, I've got to go out and run for hours or train for a half marathon and pound the streets. All of this is a stress on the body, which releases cortisol. Our body's relation to stress is to release adrenaline first of all, but then cortisol is released to bring adrenaline under control. The presence of cortisol in the system is vital because it does have a healthy process, but if it's allowed to build up over long periods of time, it can become toxic and it can lead to further disruption of our endocrine system. The more cortisol builds up in the system, the more of an impact it's going to have on our endocrine balance and the balance of progesterone and estrogen. So managing stress is crucial during menopause. So we have the three levels: xenoestrogens, poor lifestyle and poor food choices, and stresses, internal and external. And further poor lifestyle choices such as smoking. The detox process of smoking needs lots and lots of vitamin C's, which the pituitary gland needs to nourish it. Poor, processed diets. It doesn't provide us with the vitamin B's and trace minerals we need. Alcohol needs a certain level of detoxification, which will take place in the liver, and caffeine will cause a stress on our system, which will cause more cortisol to be released. All of that cortisol with its relationship to adrenaline, whether our blood sugar is being released quite quickly from the muscles in order to deal with this stress, blood sugars are not being used, the cortisol is released to get the adrenaline under control, and it works with insulin to take away blood sugars out of our system, and it will fix them in the fat cells around the middle. This leads to blood sugar imbalances because the body then perceives that we need to get to eat glucose in order to replenish the glycogen from the muscles, and we're going to start to get food sugar imbalances. All of this stress on the system needs more cortisol, so poor glandular health, poor lifestyle choices, xenoestrogen and the cortisol build up together will all lead to the liver becoming overloaded. Now, the liver has a huge role to play in the body. It's an organ and it's a gland. And it has over 500 different functions to perform. And if there are any functions it can avoid performing as a result of this overload, it will do. It will avoid detoxification. It will avoid getting rid of excess estrogen. And if it can, it will avoid metabolizing fat, as there's so many other jobs to do. So you can see how important the liver is. So we've looked at the issues, and in part 2 we're now going to look at some of the natural solutions to alleviate your menopausal symptoms. And as I said, I'm going to give you some easy top tips that you can start introducing straight away. So see you in part 2.